Hey everybody, welcome to Show Dog Prep School's Breeder of Influence interview. Today we're going to be talking to Maggie, Peat, and Tom Sikora of Pramada-Koradox Kennels. I usually start these with talking about how we met, and I've known Tom and Maggie personally on a local level because they actually show in my area. And I guess it's been a few years now. Zaina must be, I think she's almost 4.
I think that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when Zaina, I saw Maggie and Tom at a dog show with this darling little black and tan long hair puppy kind of being pokey on the leash. And I took her home for a week to work on getting her out and about because, at the time they were very busy and didn't have time to get her out. And that's what I do. So I guess when she was probably about 11 months old, 10 months old, maybe, she came to live with me full time. So she's been here since. So our, acquaintance relationship went to friends and breeder. And so that's how we met. So I want to start out by asking you guys, who is Pramata-Koradox Kennel? I know that there's a history and it's 2 kennels combined. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I'm Pramata and Tom's Coradox. So I'm second generation. So Pramata Dachshunds started in the early 70s with my parents. So Pam and Dave Peat, they're multi-group judges. And they actually were based in Minnesota. That's where I was born and raised. I pretty much grew up in the whelping box and at dog shows. Showed my first dog when I was 3. And it was pretty much guaranteed that I was going to do breeding and showing. So like I said, they started breeding before I was even born, through the 70s. By the 80s, I was pretty actively showing. At that point, I was about 6 or 7. And we continued to breed long-hair Dachshunds since then. We kind of had a big shift in probably the mid-90s. We brought in a couple dogs from Dan Harrison of Boondocks, and we did a breeding that we'd really wanted to do with a dog of mine, Pramata's Cubert, to a female that we got from whelping a litter for Dan, actually, and that produced Pramata's Curmudgeon. That was actually the first long-haired dachshund to win the Group of the Garden. He's the sire of 3 national specialty winners, and is really the cornerstone of our breeding program. So that was in the he was born in 91, won the Group in the Garden in 98. At that point, I had graduated college. He had actually been sold to be campaigned by Carlos Puig, and I was starting my career. I took about 7 years off, and at that point, my parents had moved to Arizona, as had I. We kind of had a break from breeding long-hair Dachshunds. It was about 7 years that I took a break from, I would say, late 97 until I got a long-hair Dachshund from Cindy Geyser that went back to Ben, and a female from Kay Midler who went back to my stuff primarily, Pramada dogs. And that was kind of my reboot in, at that point, 2003 or so, 2004.
So when you say you guys took a break for like 7 years, does that mean there was no breeding, no showing, like it was like nothing happened? Or were there people out there using dogs that you could get stuff back? How do you do that? How do you take a break and then come back?
Yeah. So I had no dogs when I moved from Arizona to the Bay Area. Bert, who I talked about, Ben's father, had passed away about 6 months before I moved to Arizona, from Arizona to the Bay Area. And I had no dogs from 2000 until I got the dog Bob from Cindy Geyser. So I had really, so the movie Best in Show, most people on here know that movie. When I was campaigning Ben prior to going to Carlos and kind of before I started my career, I was Parker Posey. Like I had gotten I'd gone too far. I didn't like the person I was at dog shows specifically. And so I decided I needed to kind of step back and reassess and see what was, what caused that or how I would be able to return to dog shows. And I went to no dog shows really for quite some time. Um, and my parents at that point had gotten an Affenpinscher. There was a Ben daughter. That was the last breeding that I had done. Her name was Kleptomaniac. She was shown by one of my best friends, Carrie Beaver. But I don't think I ever saw Bonnie, was her call name, shown at a show. So then I went to a national. It was the first national that was in Riverside. And it was when a Ben's son, Dallas, won. And I looked at all of the dogs there, and I was kind of disappointed in where Longhair Dachshunds had gone. And I decided I wanted to start to show and breed again. And I reached out to Cindy Geyser of Insight, and she had a male that went back to Dallas. And so I thought it was kind of the type I liked, and it was a pedigree I liked. And then I went to Kay Midler. She had one of the last litters that we bred when we were still in Minnesota, a Pramata dog that she had bred her. And she had a litter that was sired by a Havana Joe, Bubba, son. And so that kind of gave me half my pedigree again. And so I got a female from her. So that was I'm going to describe it as a reboot. So probably 2 or 3 generations of not Pramata dogs, but when you go back, they have Pramata in their pedigrees. And so that was my quote reboot in the early mid 2000s.
Okay. How about you, Tom?
So I didn't grow up showing dogs or anything, and I actually got my first Dachshund. It's a mini Longhair, actually a mini Smooth, out of like a cardboard box in front of a Safeway, and she was just like my pet, unregistered, like grocery store puppy.
She's still alive.
She's still alive.
Yeah.
So, and
those grocery store dogs,
yeah.
those cardboard box dogs, I swear to God.
Yep. And then I decided after having her for about a year that I was kind of living out, doing kind of a back to the land thing. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to just be up on a mountain my whole life. So I'm like, I want to do, I don't know why I picked dog shows, but I liked my dogs. I like doing stuff with them. So I'm like, let me see what a dog show's about. So I got a little mini Longhair, kind of pet quality, and started going to a couple dog shows here and there. And the more I went, the more I realized that I wanted standard Longhair Dachshunds, the more I saw them. So, fast forward a couple years later, I actually got a standard Smooth from Mickey Perry, Simon, which we had a lot of fun. And I learned a lot with him. And probably about a year later, Mickey offered me Wally, who was not even 2 at the time. And so I took him home, and we really had a lot of fun. And Wally and I learned like a lot together. And then that led me to meeting Maggie because I wanted a bit from one of her litters. So I got Callie in 2010. And that's kind of the start of my breeding program of Coradox, which within I think I did 3 litters that were just mine. And by the time I was on my 4th litter, we had already started co-breeding litters together and just sort of, doing doing all our breedings together and going to shows together, and then eventually living together. And that's my short story of how I got into this. So.
I want to talk about Wally a little bit because that's pretty unusual. I mean, I think other than anything out of him, he's the only standard dapple I've seen.
Yeah,
right? And then his kids.
Yeah, so there are some, there are a few people with standard dapples out there, and I mean, I'll just be blunt and say it. I think Wally was one of the first one of the only standard dapples that people have seen within the last, 5-10 years currently that actually is like a quality bred standard long hair, if that makes sense.
And he goes back to smooth.
Wally doesn't go back to smooth.
Oh, he doesn't?
No. Oh, well, I mean, way back.
Right.
Yeah,
but the
way
dappling.
back. The dappling comes from the smooths, like 6 or 7 generations back. So,
okay.
But yeah. And he is actually, the funny thing is he is actually Brando's cousin, because Wally's dad was litter mates with Brando's mother. So it's kind of, which was the interesting part. That's why part of the reason I was looking at a dog from Maggie was because pedigree wise, they
would tie in back there.
Yeah. So, yeah. And he's still doing great. He's still alive. He turned 12 this year. What year is it?
It's 2000.
It's 2000, right? He turned 13 this year.
He's 13.
He turned 13. Yeah.
So why do you think it is that there's not more? I mean, like, people like that look. It's very popular, obviously, in miniature. Yeah. How come you think there's not more?
So,
I think that one thing is there's just not a lot of it out there, and like from our point of view with Wally, we have been super picky about because when I got him, I was flooded with inquiries from just random, backyard,
everybody in the world,
breeders wanting to breed to him. And I'm like, I'm not just going to breed this dog to anything that walks. So, and because people wanted to breed to him just for the color, I guess I kind of was like, yeah, no, we're not just going to let him go out. We don't let our dogs really go out to stud just willy-nilly as it is.
Right.
But with him, we were especially protective because even though he's a dapple, like, we don't breed just for the color. And all the inquiries I got for him, they didn't care about anything else except the dappling. And I was like, well, but look at the rest of the dog. How does the dog, like, structurally fit, the standard? And how is it going to work with the bitch you want to use? And, I mean, one person was like, oh, well, I'm really trying to develop I want to develop a standard long hair cream dapple. And I'm like, no. And for me, when the color becomes the priority over the structure, like, I'm done listening after like 2 minutes. And, because for me, the color is, it's the farthest thing that I think about when I'm breeding a dog, with the exception of when we're breeding Wally and we're choosing to breed him to a dog. Color comes into play because while we haven't done it often, we won't breed him to a clear red, which is a dog that won't produce black and tan. So when he is bred to a red dog, we only breed him to a red dog who can produce black and tan, so that if we end up with, one, because we want the black and tan, and two, if we end up with any red dapples, they're just going to go to a pet home. We won't place a red dapple in a show home or keep a red dapple because they become hidden, and then that's how you end up with the random double dapple surprise that you don't know about, that they happens in minis, right? So that's just one of the things we do. And if you breed him to a clear red, you don't have a chance of getting a black and tan. So, but all that happens after we decide that structure and that pedigree is going to work together. And then we go, okay, Wally would be a good choice for this. Now, is the color going to be okay? So
let's just kind of
if that makes sense.
Yeah, let's scroll back a little. So Tom had Wally, but my parents' very first Dachshund was a chocolate dapple. And when they got their first dog for breeding, they worked with Miles McElrath, who actually bred dappled longhairs. And when my parents did their first couple litters, they realized that it was really hard to breed quality dogs, let alone quality dogs of different colors. The traditional red and black and tan are dominant, not dominant genetically, what you see.
Yeah.
You have a much larger gene pool to select
from.
from.
They're like, it is hard enough to breed a good one. We can't focus on color. So having
to be careful about stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many additional. My mom was a nurse when I grew up, but prior to that, she was a science teacher. So genetics was kind of one of her things. And when she looked at all the components and the things that come with dapples, and for people in other breeds, it's the Merle gene. So it's the same as Merle. We call it dapple. It's Merle. So when that was all kind of in the beginning stages of Pramata, the decision was, let's just stick with the traditional red and black and tan and forego any focus on color, because it's just too difficult. And that's just one more complexity to get a really quality dog that is a solid genetics and a color. So fast forward 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're actually, our next litter that we have planned is breeding our girl Holly, who is a red, but she carries black and tan, to Wally Seaman. Wally's too old to do it himself anymore. But to Wally Seaman. And my hope is I would love to have a black and tan dapple of quality out of that litter to kind of go to keep that living, to keep that aspect of Wally living, because he's getting older. But at the same time, like Maggie was saying, the color part, and we were saying earlier, the color part of it is so, that's like kind of a bonus. Pedigree wise, I think it's going to be a really nice breeding. So the color part of it is kind of like, oh, well, this will be kind of neat if we get that, Yeah. So
I do think too that, you guys have obviously been doing this for a long time and you have a really good handle on things. So I think once you have, like your solid, not fancy, not rare colors all in check, then maybe you can start to feel a little bit more confident about, like bringing in that other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember this, but it might have been when you were out of it. But I had a rescue years ago, and his name was Popeye, and he was like, I love this little dog. It was like the horrible little rescue dog that nobody wanted. I went with another rescuer to pick up 5 dogs. And there was 2 standard long hairs, 2 mini long hairs, and then Popeye. And she's like, well, I don't want that one, because he was a double dapple and he had one eye. And then the other thing was just sort of like, like this little meaty hole. But, he could see some, but I can see, I lived with a dog who was affected from being a double dapple, and a not well-bred one either. Right. Plus he was already like 10 when I got him. So who knows what his eyes were like earlier. But so, so that becomes an issue, right? If you're having, dapples or dapple floating around back there, right? Can that then become a problem?
No, dapple on its own is perfectly safe. It's only when it's doubled up. So, you can't carry dapple. You cannot carry dapple. So either you're dapple or you're not, which is where the hidden red dapple, because a dapple puppy, when it's red, and many breeders know this, I'm sure, very clearly, because it's so much more prevalent in the miniatures. Yeah. A black and tan puppy generally is very clearly dapple, and it stays dapple for its life. A red dapple can be a red dapple at birth, and within 3 days, the dappling muddies into the red, and you kind of can't tell. So if you're not really on it, and all it takes is one little spot. I mean, it was funny, like our boy Ryder, who is out of a Wally daughter.
Who's dapple.
Like, we're like, oh, he's totally black and tan. He's not dapple. And then we're at a show, and we see this little spot of, like, gray dappling on his tail. And we're like... oh my God, how did we miss that? Is he a dapple? So we sent in a color test to 2 different color places to double check, and he came back not dapple. But it was one of those things that we're like, if he's a dapple, we need to know, because that will affect his usage in the future, So.
Okay, so I didn't know this. So they cannot carry dapple. If they're dapple, they are.
It's dominant.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that dapple. So Wally, if you ever go on our website, look at our pictures, Wally looks like a black and tan. In Showgroom, he has dapple here on his chest, and he actually has dappling all underneath him. But if you were to see that dog just kind of going around the ring in profile,
like I've had so many judges, like they don't know he's a dapple till he gets on the table and they see his face and they see, I call it his tie, because he had like this silver strip down his.
So unlike in miniatures, and I don't know why this is, but unlike in miniatures, typically in a standard, in a black and tan dapple, and let's talk about this real quick. Dapple or merle is a pattern. The color is the color. So you have two things. Wally, for instance, is a black and tan color, and he is a dapple pattern. So genetically, you have, anytime you breed Wally to a female, you take a coin and you flip it. Is that dog going to be black and tan? And then you take a second coin and you flip it. Is it going to be dapple? Those are two separate traits. So that dapple trait in a standard, typically as a puppy, you'll see it.
Like Wally was all
very
spotty.
Clearly.
And then as he got older, the dappling very much faded away. And I know that there's some other genetic aspect, like getting deeper into it on why, but one of the reasons there's not a lot of standard dapples, but the standard dapples you tend to see, mostly they'll be very dappled as puppies, and as they get older, the dappling is less obvious from afar. Unlike a lot of miniatures you'll see and you'll be like, wow, that is a beautiful dapple pattern. Right. So in a way, it's kind of, as far as show structure go, like when you get past the structure, but our standard calls for dappling to be pretty much a 50-50 if you're dappled, not one dominant over the other. So if you lift him up and look at his belly, you're like, oh, there's the rest of the 50% of the dappling, or if you shaved him down. But anyway, it's just
and then just when Tom was talking about the red dapples and that sort of thing, a very well-respected breeder that I know in miniatures, she bred two dogs and they were reds.
She thought they were just both red dogs.
They were both red, as far as she knew. And she got a dapple. And this is a woman I respect greatly. And she's like, I went through those puppies from the beginning. Like there should not have been, that bitch should not have been dapple, but she was.
There's just a little spot of dappling.
So clearly, that's the kind of thing. In the event you're ever questioning that, the ability to do genetic testing is something I really, really recommend when you're dealing with something that can have distinct, effects, like a dapple gene or that sort of thing. If you have a question or you're going to breed to a dapple and you're not sure, then I highly recommend genetic testing. It's something that... And
we've actually done it just for our dogs to see if they carry black and tan, because most of our dogs are clear red. And we're, this is something that we are firm believers in, is that you need to, if you keep breeding clear red to clear red to clear red to clear red to clear red, eventually you start washing out that red and you start getting that weird kind of orangey yellow color, and just not that deep, nice mahogany that we tend to like. I think you
see more white too.
Yeah,
you'll start to see white on the...
I've heard the truth of black and tan too, where if you keep breeding black and tan, black and tan, black and tan,
it muddies
the
out
tan gets muddied out.
Yeah, so we tend to we want to do that to try and get some black and tan, to make sure that it's intermixed, because we don't want to be, we have a whole run full of red dogs, and I'm like, we have one black and tan here because Wally lives right down the street, so Wally was getting picked on by some of the older dogs or younger dogs, so he's living with a lady who lives about 20 minutes from us, so.
And it's spoiled rotten.
Yeah,
I have to say, Forever Homes as a breeder. I don't know if this is something that you're going to talk about later, but as a breeder, I cannot thank my Forever Homes more. It is what part of what we breed for, and for us to be able to find those Forever Homes for dogs that have contributed to our breeding program and been shown and everything else, and then give them a Forever Home. That's, to me, that's amazing.
People are always like, how can you part with them after, you have them for 3 or 4 or 5 years? And I mean, the truth is if we kept everyone, we would have too many dogs and they would not get the proper attention that they need. And of course, there's always those dogs that you're like, this dog, Callie, she's not going anywhere. Daffy, she's not going anywhere. Wally, I thought would never be going anywhere, but he was having a rough time with the boys around. And this actually, the only reason he left was because he went to her house to stay for 2 weeks while we were doing, like, we were rearranging dog runs, and we just didn't have the space to keep him separate from our younger
other
males. And I'm like, can he just stay for like 2 weeks? And she's like, yeah, that's fine. We go to pick him up, and she's like, can he just stay here? And we were like, okay, well, you can't neuter him, and you're only 20 minutes away. So, yeah. So,
well, I'm very grateful that I was able to get one of your dogs, and that she, I mean, yeah, she was a show dog, and she, she never had a litter, but we did work on that. But, I mean, I just think it's the best of both worlds. We don't think we live in a time anymore where people can have these huge kennels with 100 dogs. I mean, I don't know any place in the country where people can do that, and then also I think a lot of dogs aren't a candidate for that. Like, it just doesn't work for everybody to be one of a bunch.
Right. Yeah. And there are so many people, like so many of our owners were, or are people who didn't want a puppy, and they were so happy to get a dog that was past the antics of puppyhood and potty training, and they just get the perfect couch dog, or the perfect walking dog or whatever.
Right.
And
I probably have a handful.
Yeah, we have a waiting list for our
people
adults.
for just adults.
Yeah. Who don't want puppies. They're just waiting for an adult to retire. So
I think it's great you guys do that. And I think it's getting to be a more normal and sort of well received that this is what people do, that like it's a kindness to the dog to give it a home where it can be someone's everything, and go on hikes all the time, or go, or whatever, just to be, that's just the next stage of their life, No.
Yeah.
I mean, a dog, like,
it's like they graduated.
Yeah, it's like, I went from being part of the Pramada-Koradox pack, which we have our heart dogs, that when Brando passed, his son Charles became the keeper, and then Callie, which is how we met and ultimately got married, and then Daffy, who is special in so many ways. But we have another 6 or 7 dogs here that ultimately, they may not stay forever. And when somebody comes to us and says, they're an older couple, or they work, or they want a dog that, they don't want to have to commit to 4 or 5 months of puppy time. To me, that's fantastic. And with a puppy, while I've been breeding my whole life, and Tom's been breeding over 10 years, and I can look at a litter. We have 9 puppies right now. I spend a lot of time watching those puppies to kind of determine their temperament and personality and match them with their homes and everything. The reality is there's development that occurs from the time they go to their homes at between 9 and 12 weeks and when they become an adult. And so some people love that. But if you're a person that really has to have a specific situation, say you have an older dog that you really need to make sure you're matching the temperament with.
Right.
A retired show dog or retired brood bitch gives you the opportunity to know exactly what you're getting.
Absolutely.
So while I feel I feel very confident in my ability to say, this is what I expect this temperament to be. There's still an unknown aspect, whether it's environmental or other things, but it's just the kind of thing in some homes.
And you can't make him be 2, No. If he's 10 weeks old, he has to go through being a puppy that gets raised, and that is not a fit for everybody.
When they pick up their puppies and they're like, oh, are they already crate trained? And like, they've started, but you've got a ways to go.
Yeah, you've got some work to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we have some comments here, so I just want to kind of share these. Just a lot of nice comments, but also Lori asked, how old is Wally?
Oh, Wally is now
he's
2007,
he's 13.
13. Yeah,
okay.
He turned 13 in May.
So that's nice. You guys have longevity. That's like one of them, we're not going to go too far off on this, but I'm just going to say, when people are like, they talk about, Dachshunds are, so overbred or they're crippled, this will come up from time to time. Like, there's breeds that just shouldn't be because people don't like how they're constructed. which always makes me laugh because I'm like, have you ever tried to chase one down in the field? Because they can move. And if you haven't, please don't tell me the dogs are crippled, because let me see you catch him.
Well, and that's where, when breeding to a standard and breeding for health versus just breeding for color or what's popular comes in handy. Because, like, I mean, how many times have you been to a dog show and you see a dachshund whose ribbing comes less than 50% back and then the rest is loin? Now, how is that dog going to support its back? The ribbing is needed to support. So, I mean, we're not going to get into the depths of, all that, because that's like a 2-hour conversation.
But that's one of the first things I want to know. Like, I just had friends recently who got a golden retriever. And I'm like, well, when we talk to breeders, I need to see that they have 10, 12-year-old dogs at their house. Right. Because if they all die from cancer at 7 or 6, like, I just feel like my dachshunds are living to be almost always 14 to 15. And it's like, I feel pretty good about that in terms of longevity and health. And like, these are dogs that are going strong until they're not,
Well, we typically tell people
6 months or something.
We typically tell people, like, our goal is 12, 13 years. If you get more than that, that's bonus time. Because unlike a miniature where you expect like 15 to 18, you have to remember these are a medium-sized dog, not a miniature dog, on, with the standards, on small legs. So if they had regular legs, they're the size of a medium-sized dog.
Like a Springer Spaniel.
Which is like a 12 to 13, 14-year lifespan, So we're like, if we can get to 12... after 12, like, we call that like a bonus time. And something that you were talking about, cancer, people don't talk about with dachshunds, longhairs a lot specifically, is hemangiosarcoma, which is an issue in longhairs and standard longhairs that we should talk about more. So when you have the dog that is playing one day and then is dead the next, that is, you're a very high likely chance that that's hemangiosarcoma, which can hit at any age. So we were, because you lost Bob to hemangio at 7,
6.5.
Yeah, and Brando had it, but he lived till 12.
And they were both intact, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we kind of went through our pedigrees and our list and our homes.
As a breeder,
we're like, what are we doing something that? And then after we went through everything, we realized that our percentages were right around in line with basic cancers in dogs as a whole. We're under 3% of our dogs have died from a cancer at this point. But you have to remember, we're going over, back in time. Let's say, how many litters since you really start keeping track? So mid-2000s, right?
So that's the L litter.
Yeah. So, we're talking like between the both of us, like 30-something litters.
It's more than that. So we've done the whole alphabet once for me. That's 26. And then this litter is the...
halfway through again, right?
This litter is the P litter.
Yeah.
So that's, if we went L to L and then L to P, we're at over 52.
But it was about, like, we went through it, and it was about, like, 100.
So about 26 litters total.
It was like
52 in my entire livelihood.
It was like 100 and something puppies that have been produced, and the rate of hemangio was under 3%, which is very low compared to what they say it should be in general in all dogs. But it is something that we tell all our puppy owners. We're like, look, long-hair standard dachshunds are more prone to hemangio than the other dachshunds, it seems. Now, I don't know if that's just because, there
have been some prominent dogs who had it.
Right.
So we've paid attention.
One study we talked about said that all dogs in general, mixed dogs, purebreds, there is a higher percentage than is generally thought of, because most people, their pet dies suddenly. They go to the vet and they get it cremated. They don't do a necropsy, or they bury it in the backyard. So there's all these, I don't know why it died. It must have just gotten to some poison, or it must have something must have happened. They don't think, oh, maybe it had a hemangio tumor on its spleen or its kidney or liver, and they were fine. And, so it's just, but the fact that it's getting more and more talked about, which is why I guess we're talking about it, is so the more and more people are aware, the more and more they can say, especially breeders, to say, this dog died suddenly. Let me spend the money to do a necropsy and see what was the cause of that, to see if it was a cancer, or don't just assume, oh, they must have gotten into something, you know.
And the kind of the challenge is, like in other breeds where hemangiosarcoma and other cancers are quite prevalent. Golden
like
retrievers,
flat-coated
retrievers, Portuguese water dogs. There's a very well-known oncologist, Jaime Modiano. He spoke at our national. He was very vocal that from what they can tell, there is not a genetic component. It's not hereditary, meaning you have a dog that had hemangio, that dog is going to produce 50% of its puppies are going to have hemangio. Right. They are not seeing that linkage, which is challenging, because if I could do anything, it would be to test for it.
Right.
Because let's be honest, unlike other cancers or other diseases, it's not they're diagnosed, I have time to prepare or time to treat. It's more likely my dog was fine and now my dog's dead. You know? So
that's what people so when you're going to a breeder like ourselves, that's one of the things we kind of talk about when all of my puppy breeders get birthday emails. At your 7th birthday, you get kind of an update. Your dog's now a senior. These are things we recommend. And as a breeder, and we've seen this, and I'm sure when you talk to Jamie and Linda, and when you talk to Scotia, the reality is, as breeders like us, you're invested in those animals. They've gone to a new home, but you still consider them yours. Right. You produce them, you brought them into the world. Our relationship with that dog does not end when they leave the house.
Right.
That's part of, as breeders and being involved, we do that. I would like to just talk a little bit about how our dogs have kind of, Pramata and Coradox have kind of been involved in Longhairs going forward. And you said breeders of influence. I think, if you look at pedigrees of dogs, top winning dogs in the last 25 years, and you see Pramata, we're not a giant breeder. We don't have, 4 or 5 litters a year. We never have. 2 litters at a time is rare, and typically only when we expect one to be very small. But I think one of the things as a breeder of influence is being aware of what the goal of the breed is and a standard, and being selective, but still being open. So while Tom said our dogs aren't used with outside dogs, it's a selective thing. As a second generation, I'm very protective. It's very, if someone comes to me as, they want to breed to, like, you reach out to Tom and say, I want to breed to Wally because he's dapple. When you start the conversation with that, you're likely going to get a no. But it also means that when somebody wants to join the sport and start showing dogs and may start breeding dogs, I think as a breeder of influence, part of my job, and Tom has been instrumental in this as well, is being a mentor and being willing to part with a quality animal for somebody who is willing to put in the time and put in the effort, learn, and give them a solid opportunity. I've said this before. We have some co-breeding that we do. We have some people who we've sold show dogs to. And Tom and I have said this, that we can look at 2 puppies, and if one is better than the other, and we're still going to get, say, a litter back or something, but one is clearly, going to be easier to win with. The reality
easier
is
to learn to show with. Like,
the reality is, I can give that dog to the new person, because with my experience and my knowledge and my recognition in the ring, I already have an advantage when I go and show my dogs. So I need to give all the advantage to that new person. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
totally.
Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and it's also like,
100%.
how many times have you been to a show or a ring, and not just Dachshunds in general, just in dog breeds in general, and you look at the new person and they're very happy they got this brand new puppy and they're very excited and they're having all the fun, and then behind the scenes you say to yourself, you're like, that, why would that breeder give that person that dog? That is not the quality dog that they would show themselves. Why would they sell it to a person as a show dog? Like, if it is not the quality that we would personally take in the ring or keep for ourselves to breed, that's going to a pet home. Like, we're not, but we see it, and especially when the dogs start leaving the US and going, I mean, that's one of the reasons
going to other countries,
people from other countries come to us for dogs, is because we will sell them dogs that we are proud of. We will sell them dogs that are our very best, so that they can, I mean, that's our reputation around the world. You know, that is, we want to say, look, these are dogs from these people, you know, these are Pramada-Koradox dogs. So these dogs are, you know, we don't want to send a dog and have people be like, well, what is this, you know? And you know, it's just, it's one of those things that's a pet peeve, is to go and watch, you know, newish people having, you know, dogs that aren't of the quality that the breeder would keep for themselves to show. Or, you know, because so many breeders, show breeders particularly, want to show the entire litter. So they will breed a litter and every dog is a show dog. Every dog goes into a show home.
I was just going to say
that. We have
that.
a litter of 9 right now, and they are likely all going to pet homes, because we look at them and we go, you know what? This just isn't...
It didn't mesh.
It didn't mesh. It wasn't the quality that we normally would produce. They're going to make beautiful pets. There's a couple that we still might just grow and see how it goes.
Yeah.
But right now we're looking at them going, this just didn't, this wasn't our best thing. And we're not embarrassed by it. We made beautiful pets for people. You know, not everything works. That's how you
not
learn.
only that, I mean, that's what this is, right? It's like you do your best, and then, but like, genetics get to do what they want. Mother Nature gets to do what she wants. Like in the end, like,
and there's no one pulling
happen.
your arm, forcing you to send these dogs to show homes. Like,
exactly,
you know, it's like, and people say, well, I don't have anything else. And it's like, well, you know,
okay,
you know, if that's your excuse, then I don't think it's a great one, but hey, to each their own. It's not for us.
We had a litter.
So
it was Lily. So what was that? That was the L. So we're on the P litter.
Lily and Winston.
So that was Amaryllis. So that was the A litter.
Yeah.
This last A litter. So we're currently on P. So scroll back probably 12, 13 litters. We had a litter. This bitch that we kept to show was very typey. Decent structure.
We kept her and her brother.
Yep. She literally, I think she probably had like 7 or 8 points. She'd gone reserve to a specialty weekend major.
Yeah, her brother had a major.
Lots of compliments from people, and we're sitting at a Tom and I are sitting at a restaurant after I'd gone to a show without him and come back, and I'm like, you know, I just don't like her. Like, it's like, she's sweet and everything, but I look at the time we had Daffy as a puppy.
Yeah, so we had
and Buttercup as a puppy.
That would be both hard to judge against.
So we had these puppies, and I'm like, I look at this bitch Lily, and I'm like, she doesn't have any of these things that these other bitches from our later produced litters have. And I would rather spend my time and energy developing this, which is what I want, and go forward with, than spend the time and showing this one.
Then I have to figure out how to breed that to make more of what I really want.
What I really want.
Right?
Right. So, I mean, I literally, because as I said, I probably have a handful of people waiting for older dogs at all times. I placed her within the month. Yeah. And the next set of dog shows, I didn't have a class bitch, and we had local people who were like, well, where's your bred by bitch? I'm like, oh, I placed her. Why would you do that? Oh my God, she was beautiful. I'm like, it really wasn't what we wanted, you know?
Yeah.
And I think part of being selective and being critical is how we got to where we are.
Right.
And it's how we have the reputation we have. And if anything, I think we're more critical of our own dogs than of other dogs. In fact, I know I am more critical of my own dogs than of other dogs. Like, I can stand and watch a class at our national of, the bred by class at our national, and see dogs of quality and see dogs that I think are worthy of being shown and stuff, and objectively analyze that class. And then I will come home and I will just like nitpick everything about our dogs. And it's, sometimes it's ending up with a litter that, okay, I think we'll keep one of these girls and see how she grows up. But it's saying, okay, that didn't work. We need to do something else.
Yeah.
And make that hard decision and be dedicated to quality, not quantity.
Right.
And your vision, I think, not getting sidetracked by like, well, it's, it's a different type, but it's sort of okay. And, let's just see what happens when it's really not what you're looking for.
And type and style. I mean, if you look at Dachshunds, if you look at standard long-hair Dachshunds today versus 10 years ago, there is a distinct change in style to a lot of dogs in the ring. That is not a style I like. It is not a style I have any interest in producing. I love that I can take a picture of a dog from 1975 and put a picture of Ben and put a picture of my dog Sky that we showed a couple years ago and put a picture of Edward, who is our current male that is not finished due to COVID, and see them all in a line and see it being a very cohesive group of dogs. Are there improvements? Sure. Are there differences? Yes, but it's not dramatic.
Right.
And to me, that's important. The standard has not changed. So
that's funny.
And that's the nitpick that people who don't show dogs have, which I think which is rightly so. Show dogs tend to become people like they go to extremes. They want more of this, more of this, more of that. And all of a sudden now you've got a dog that is the extreme on one end or the other versus that standard that was, a Dachshund is not an extreme breed. It's a very moderate breed. So, but that happens. We see that in how many breeds have we seen?
Not just
so many.
I mean, our dogs are supposed to go out in the field and function. I want my dogs to go to a pet home and be relatively easy maintenance,
Yeah.
That, to me, that's all important. Quality of coat, extremely important. Amount of coat, not so important.
Yeah.
Edward, who is our new dog, literally that dog, we did a breed seminar, and I took a comb and I ran it against his backwards, and his coat literally all stood up and immediately laid back down again.
Yeah, that dog could get covered in mud. You could put him in a crate covered in mud, and the next morning you would wake up and all the mud would be flaked off in his crate, not on his coat. I mean, and that, to me, that's what a working hunting dog's coat should be. It shouldn't be a long hair coat. Shouldn't be cottony. It's going to get caught up in the brush. Right. It's going to get mangled. It's going to get matted. So
it's going to collect debris.
Yeah, it's not to say we don't have, like, sometimes, we have a new puppy right now, Duncan, and I look at his coat and I'm like, oh, your coat's going to be a little cottony. But his dad had what I would consider not the greatest coat, a softer, finer coat, whereas like Edward has that just nice, hard, long hair. Like, it just, you wash him, you don't even have to dry him.
I have pictures on my Facebook of Brando, who is actually Edward's nephew.
Something like that.
Yeah. Because Edward's frozen semen.
Yeah.
Right.
Brando was a mutter. So he went out to my backyard at my old house, and literally he dug a hole the size of a manhole, basically. I mean, it was huge.
Just in the mud.
In the mud.
Yeah.
And so I have a picture of him, and he literally is covered in like rich black dirt and mud from head to toe. Like he's in a tub and he's just covered. And I kind of did like a rinse off of him, and then I just put him in a crate. And the next morning, literally, like his feet were just perfectly clean. And that's to me what part of being a versatile dog and a correct long-haired dachshund is, to be able to say to some puppy owner, you know what, they can go and have fun and it's fine.
Yeah.
If they get covered in mud and do whatever you want to do, but put them in a crate. When he's dry,
give him a brush
it, it'll come out. That's a correct code.
Yeah. So we got a couple of comments. One, Lori asked if you still breed minis at all, and I think you've answered pretty much. The answer is no.
Well, I'm going to back up there. So
let's hear this.
We did breed Daffy, who is one of our top producers, and she's a big winner. It's actually the dog that Tom talked about, Ryder, that we're worried he has dappling. His sire is a larger mini who actually goes back to standards. Ryder is about 18 pounds. So
not a mini.
So not a miniature.
Yeah.
In any country. But Ryder's sister is here. Her name is Vivian, and she is probably 13 pounds.
Yeah, if she's eaten.
If she's full.
Yeah.
And hasn't pooped.
So not technically a mini, but she is small enough that we actually we're keeping. She hasn't been shown yet, so we will show her because we really like her, and we will likely try doing a mini breeding with her just to see how it goes.
So we actually imported miniature semen
from a dog that we really liked that we saw when we were at Crufts
in England.
So we will try that out and see how it goes, but we're a couple years off from that.
So when I'm a firm believer that if you're going to breed miniatures, they should be miniatures. So my goal is, the standard is 11 pounds to show an open mini. Just to be clear, the only place that there is a weight limit is in the open miniature class. And a dachshund is a dachshund is a dachshund. So in America, there is no differentiation. A dachshund that is 8 pounds or a dachshund is 40 pounds, if they meet the standard structurally and everything else, they are the same. They are a dachshund. The reason that I imported the semen from England is I figure if I'm going to breed Vivian, I want to breed her to something that I know produces 11 pounds or less, and see if we can produce quality dogs that are able to be shown in the open miniature class. So, and in the rest of the world, they're a separate breed. So when we were importing the semen, I actually showed him pictures, and the man actually gave Charles one of his CCs in England. And he's like, so, but you're breeding him to miniatures. And I'm like, well, as miniature as I have ever produced.
Yeah.
So, and from that litter, we actually had the typical dichotomy of size. So there were 3 girls, I think, total in the litter. It all blurs together. One of them is like a normal standard size. I think she's like 21, 22 pounds. Then you have Vivian and her sister Matilda, which are like 12, 13 pounds. So I just want to be clear. We had no intention of doing a breed down. We were producing a dog when we bred to that larger mini.
We were actually just wanting a smaller male. We didn't realize how much smaller we were going to get. So
I think it's important for us. Part of our analysis of our breeding program and of our dogs is that we don't want 40-pound long-haired dachshunds. I don't even want 35-pound long-haired dachshunds. I think the males should be 30 pounds or between 28 and 30 pounds in show condition.
Right.
To me, that's a good size. And so to me, it was important to assess where we were going, and if anything, we were getting a distinct split. So like our females were all staying a pretty
like 22,
reasonable
23,
size, but I felt like the males were creeping. So
like going up to like 32, 33, 34, and we're like, okay, we need to try something to try and get these males back down to like Wally, show condition, 27 pounds. Brando, show condition, 27 pounds. Sky, show condition, 32 pounds. So, we had this kind of, and that's only 2 generations away from Brando. So,
looks like there's a Sky fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Sky fan too.
It's true. So it's very, it's, as a breeder, it's knowing what is that goal and what is it that we want. And that's something that took a leap for us to say, our dogs are getting too big. How can we bring size down? And so we went to this dog, Sammy. And as a result of Sammy, we kept Ryder, who we bred this current litter from. And then we also have Vivian. So I don't know if we're getting what we want. It's first generation, but we'll see, you know, it takes time to figure it out.
So, and coming back to, size and trying, that was one thing we tried, was this mini, but then we were also very pleasantly surprised. We had, Bubba Seaman that we got, Havana Joe, that we bred to Daffy on her last litter. And those dogs are now going to be 2 in November. And Edward is what we wanted, like not only structurally wise, but size wise. When he's fully mature, he's going to be about 26, 27 pounds. So we're right back at that, going back to that older semen, right back at this smaller size. So now we can kind of see,
it's funny we say that smaller size.
Yeah.
I mean
it's a problem that you and I have both agreed we've seen in the ring, is that we go in the ring with our dogs that are 30, 32 pounds, and our dogs are the small ones when we're at a national. And we're like, I don't want a 40-pound standard long hair. I don't want a 35-pound standard long hair.
Yep.
So
it hurts. I've done it to put them on the table every weekend.
You should hear my dad at times. He'll be like, that's a big effing dog.
So let me ask you guys this. We kind of talked about some of the questions I have on here, and you've talked about this a little bit, but do you feel like you have a formula for your breeding program? I mean, do you say like when I was taught with Dachshunds, I feel like, which is worlds away from Lauchen, because that's a very rare breed and the gene pool is very different. But it was like, you line breed, then you go out, then you come in. Do you have a formula? Do you always try and do, like people talk about the, grandfather to granddaughter breeding? Like, what is your go-to if you have one?
I don't think there's a specific formula that we stick to. We just look at the, like, say for instance, the girls we have and that we're planning on, that are coming up, or that we're planning on in the next couple years. And we look at their pedigrees and we say, okay, what do we have? We run them through pedigree programs and look at, first off, breeding coefficients. Because once you start getting above 15, you have to be very certain with Dachshunds that, that's getting very line bred, very, very close in my opinion. So, you kind of look at that first, but I think first we look at the structure of the dog and say, what's going to complement, what does this dog need? What does it, and then what do we have that can work with that and kind of go from there?
We definitely phenotype first. So that's the dog structure, is phenotype. What are we looking at physically? And then genotype second. We also have a buffet of frozen semen. I am a huge
we collect all our
believer
dogs.
of every one of our dogs that we may want to use in our breeding program. We collect even dogs that I didn't ultimately show. I have a dog, a Brando son frozen, that I've never showed. It's something that I find is how I maintain our type. Most people can look at a dog anywhere in the world and say that's a Pramada-Koradox dog, which to me is immensely flattering and very important to me. But For me, phenotype first. When you talk about those granddaughter grandfather breedings, it is definitely something that we have done more than once. Callie,
her first litter was
did that for her first litter. We have Sky and Paige, who are very, very tight. So that breeding was 18. It's close to 20% coefficient.
Yeah. So
in breeding coefficient.
So like when we breed, so like Callie, who is a Paige daughter, when we bred her to Rugby because that's a full outcross. So Daffy is Callie, who is kind of a tightish breeding, bred to Rugby, full outcross. So Daffy we can pretty much breed her to whatever, because we know we have that whole side that is nothing of all, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we can breed her to something kind of tighter that ties back in. And you know, there's a few breedings that we've looked at where we've been like, oh, that'd be kind of nice, like phenotype wise. And then we look at the pedigree and we're like, no, that's just a little too close. We're going to end up with, you know, we're going to really double up on some of this stuff that we don't need to. And this comes from what I don't like about Daffy. This is coming from this side. So you definitely, you know, giving yourself options. Is that your pump?
It is.
Giving yourself options for breeding, you know, obviously is very good. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that maybe I think some breeders do, is they just, you know, kind of stick into this small little circle of what they have, and then they breed into a corner and then they don't know what to do. Or I think the bigger issue is the people that they just breed to whatever the big winner is of the day, and you go and look at those pedigrees and you're like, well, no wonder the litter is not consistent. This pedigree is just a mishmash of everything. Like there's no, you know, people call it their line, and you're like, I guess it's your line, but I see one of your dogs and dogs from like 30 different breeders.
There's or that you just see these there's just no consistency. They get a nice dog once in a while, but it doesn't look like
so. And I think if you look at our pedigrees, I think one thing that people might notice or be aware of is I went out of the United States and imported dogs. I brought in a couple bitches from England. I imported a dog from Australia. When I brought the bitch from England, she produced definitely softer temperaments, lower station, beautiful ribbing and keel, maybe a little less bone. But the English also have a larger eye. That was a challenge to get beyond that larger eye.
Well, and I also think, especially for the show ring, the softer temperament was a challenge. We had to go a couple generations before the confidence, because we all know the most jerky dog at home is generally the best show dog. If you can channel that, you know, as we like to say, that a-holeness, then that makes like a great show dog. But it also makes for a challenge living in the home with other animals, especially male on male aggression. So you kind of have to balance, well, this dog that's kind of a jerk and is a really great show dog, but we're not making, 95% of our dogs are pets. They need to be, they need to have a temperament that they can go for a walk and not bark at everybody, So
So
let me ask you this: as breeders that have been doing this a long time, and you have all of this frozen semen collected, I mean, it seems to me like, don't you have a hard time going like, oh, I have to have these puppies because these puppies will need to go back to that one. I mean, it sounds like you don't really do that unless you're really, you are looking at phenotype a lot. In other words, it's not just like, I've got to get this one because this one is going to be breeding down so I can breed back to this one kind of thing.
So the frozen semen I've collected that frozen semen for a few reasons. One is that dog or that dog's sibling was something that I produced that I want to keep. Or if I've purchased the semen, it's because that dog has produced what I want and want to have in my breeding program. So for instance, we have some very old semen. We actually use some very old semen that goes back to Bayard stuff. That is a kennel lame that's been gone for decades, that we introduced into our breeding program, and actually resulted, 2 generations resulted in winner's bitch at the national in 2018, I believe. That Bayard semen, to me, is invaluable. The ability to have it, but I'm not saying, okay, I need to produce something to breed to that. I use that semen as, I know I have this
So when
available, and when I know what I'm kind of moving towards, I can use that. So we also have Dallas semen.
Yeah, we were just talking about this
which
the other
is
day.
That's Brando's father.
Yeah. So, and that's a Ben son, curmudgeon. So we actually have a little bit left, and like one, right?
Was that Dockshire?
Yes,
yeah.
Star over Texas.
Oh, so okay.
Yes, so, Dockshire, Star over Texas.
We were actually talking about this just a couple days ago, Maggie. It's like, well, maybe we should, try this on Daffy. And I was like, you know what? We used Bubba on Daffy, which is another Ben son, and we used Brando on Daffy, which is a Dallas son, and that litter was beautiful. So what was kind of why we were thinking maybe we should try Dallas. And I said, you know what? Let's just keep that in the bank, because in like 2 or 3 years, we'll be really happy. We'll probably have something that will be like, you know what? Let's go back to that now. We know what, because you keep like we're talking about earlier. You kind of go in a direction. But then sometimes you kind of want to put the brakes on and say, you know what? I think I lost a little bit of this. Let's go back to something I have that I can bring that back, which is what makes frozen semen so invaluable in a breeding program, because you are able to say, I kind of lost this along the way. I kind of, we were actually talking about this. This was about a month ago. We were looking at one of our dogs, Ruffin, who is over in Japan now. And we were like, we're kind of missing that style a little bit that we were at. And we're like, going to the Australian dog and the English dog, we kind of lost a little bit of that. So now we're kind of like, okay, let's use some of that Ruffin semen on that stuff to kind of bring some of that that look back, which is why frozen semen is, because the dog can be gone or new. You never know. I mean, you never want to regret being like, oh, I wish I would have done that sooner. As soon as the dog is old enough to produce viable semen, we're like, you're going for some fun.
True.
You guys, tell me who some of your favorite Pramada-Koradox dogs are. Like favorite.
Daffy.
Everybody loves Daffy.
Everyone loves Daffy. There's 2 things about Daffy, and they're so. Although she does drive me crazy, she is one of those dogs that loves you so much. If she could crawl inside you, she would, like into your body.
Yeah, I live with one of those that you guys made, by the way.
So that's a little much for me. I like to be loved. That's a little.
Sometimes
much.
You're like, I need some space.
I need to breathe. However, Daffy is a twofold why I adore that dog. One is, as a dachshund compared to the standard, she is probably one of the best bitches that I have ever produced. Tom and I together, and me, going back 2 generations. But then add to that, she's an amazing producer. Not only does she produce beautiful puppies, but she is an amazing mother.
She raises good puppies too.
Yeah, she free whelps in no time. I mean, her first litter was 8 puppies in 2 hours, and this last litter was 9 puppies in like 2.5 hours. She is an amazing mother, takes care of them.
And she's not the cool mom. She doesn't just let them do whatever.
She's not a, do whatever you want. She is a, I'm going to tell you no, and you better listen to me. Right. So it's not like, versus we have a litter right now, Singleton, Duncan, and his mom, Allie, is like, she is the super cool mom. Like, they play and have a blast.
Oh my God, he'll be sleeping and she wakes him up to play. So.
Versus Daffy, who's like, I have 9 of you little buggers. I don't have time to play.
Yeah.
You need to pay attention. So that's one of the things I love about Daffy. Charles is Pramata's Xavier. To me, he's a combination of Brando and Bob. Brando was my first litter back. after my break. So I produce Brando as Pramata. We call it the Pramata post Pam and Dave, basically. That makes him extra special. And he was the culmination of essentially getting the pedigrees of 3 Ben sons that Bennett sired and getting them into one pedigree. So very, very special dog there.
Also a really cool dog.
Yeah, Brando. And he's, when you look at Charles, who's a Brando son, the funny part is Charles' temperament is much more Bob, which is his grandfather, which was the dog I got from Cindy Geyser. But Bob and Trista came together, and it was me having 2 dogs only. So those dogs were spoiled. They were trained to the nines. They were ready to walk in the ring and be Rockstar show dogs because it was just me and 2 dogs. So when you think about somebody with my experience and my background having just 2 dogs to focus their entire time on, it's very different. So Charles kind of is the culmination of Brando with the Bob personality tied in, which is really nice. Charles is kind of a jerk because he's spoiled. Charles was born when I was getting ready to have to move from the South Bay to San Francisco. So after those puppies all went to their homes, Charles was my keeper. He was the only boy in a litter of 8. And so at the beginning which ones are going to be special. And he's one of those. So I would say my current favorites, Charles and Daffy. And then I'll let Tom talk about his favorites.
But real quick, I just want to go back to Charles for a second because he also went to Crufts with you, right?
He did. Charles is a UK champion.
So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I would say that England is one of the hardest places to get a championship. You have to beat all the other champions. So in order to win a certificate of championship, a CC,
they're only given at certain shows.
There's only so many shows throughout the year. Charles won 2 of his at Crufts, and one of them at it's called Midland Counties. I did all 3 of them myself. And it's a very different world. The UK show world, it's just very, it's just like US shows with the politics and everything else. So
it's very hard for an outsider to come in, and
I got a lot of, you can't just fly over here and expect to win CCs.
Yeah.
So it took time. It was 4 years from the time he got his first CC till he got his last CC at Crufts. I will not ever forget what he did and how exciting it was.
Would you do it again? Not would you do it again with him, but would you do it again with someone else?
Would I try with another dog?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Depends on the dog.
Yeah.
So it would take have to be a very, I would have to have a reason. So like I made the decision when I won Charles' first CC. Bob, who is Charles' grandfather, went to England and lived with Fran Mitchell of Bronia.
Zaina's breeder.
Mm-hmm. And he got 2 CCs and he didn't finish his championship. He was only there for about a year.
Oh, okay.
So then when Fran wanted another dog from us, I sent her a dog, a beautiful black and tan bitch, Xandra, who's actually Zaina's mother. Mm-hmm. And she finished Xandra. So she was at that point the first American bred long-haired dachshund to get a UK championship in like 45 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Fran did it herself. So
right. Who is a very well-known, respected,
well-known UK breeder. I had decided at that point that I wanted to do it myself. And there were a lot of people in Longhairs who are like, just give Charles to Fran. Fran will do it. I'm like, it's not the same. I want to do it myself.
Right.
So would I do it again? I don't know. I don't have any real desire right now.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
It's very, very expensive.
No kidding.
You're talking about trips to.
You're talking about going over there.
Yeah.
Do I think that I've produced dogs that can be made UK champions? Absolutely. And if I sent a dog over there, I had every confidence that they would get their UK championship. Bob sired multiple UK champions. So it's something that, I've done it and I'm very, very relieved and very excited, but I don't have any real desire at this moment to try it again.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Tom, who are some of your favorites of your guys' breeding? And then I want to ask who are some of your favorites outside your breeding program. So be thinking about that.
So of our breeding, Daffy, of course, for all the reasons Maggie said, because she's a great dog. Like, I love her. So Callie, of course, I didn't breed her. That was Maggie's breeding before I was part of it. But, she was my kind of first brood bitch. Again, Wally, like, I'll never forget Wally. He was my first long hair, and we learned so much together, showing in the ring, grooming, traveling, all like kind of the basic ropes, of dog show stuff. Then dogs at home that we've bred, my favorites. It's kind of hard, I guess. I really like Duncan right now. He's super cute. He's our
Chunkin'
new little
Duncan
baby.
I was waiting for that Chunkin' Duncan.
Yeah. I think Paige is one. She's one that's we placed because, like we said, we can't keep her. But she was, so Callie's first litter was a grandfather-granddaughter and produced some puppies. One of the dogs, Merlin, went to Singapore to show and live. And before he left, did I use Frozen?
Yes.
I used Frozen, right. So we collected him, and he produced the litter that Sky is from. No, Sky is Alley. Sky's out of Paige. So he produced Paige and that litter, who was bred to a Wally daughter. So Merlin, this grandfather dog, was bred to a Wally daughter, Zoe, and produced my C litter, which was Paige. And Paige is a beautiful dog. Like, she's like 21 pounds. I mean, just beautiful. Like, I just love her. And
best puppy in show at multiple shows as a puppy.
At the Cow Palace, at the Hound Show.
I remember her.
So that is probably one of my favorite girls as well. And that she was kind of like that was kind of a bittersweet, because her first litter, she produced Sky and Allie, and a couple more girls who went to pet homes. But she also had to have a C-section. And when she had the C-section, they found a tumor. And we decided then to just spay her. And then we had it sent off to see if it was cancerous. It was not cancerous, but she had a really hard time. She went into labor, but then she never started pushing. She never did anything. I'm like, we're not going to breed her again, you know? And as devastating as that was, because this was bred to Charles as a test breeding to make sure she was ready to breed her to rugby. And so it was kind of one of those, good thing is we got Allie, who was her daughter, who we eventually just bred to rugby. So
that's Duncan.
But I mean, it just kind of shows how you go all back. Like, here's this grandfather-granddaughter breeding that we did and bred to Callie. I mean, and then we took that puppy and bred to, knowing we were going to breed this bitch to rugby. But it didn't work. But thankfully, we had the daughter. So that kind of goes back to our planned breedings that, it was.
And I have to say, I would be very, very remiss. You said favorite dogs that we bred. Without a doubt, Pramata's Curmudgeon is my favorite Pramata Longhair of all time. There was a lot of breeding prior to my break. Some very, very nice dogs. Bert, Honeysuckle. My dad's first group winner was JJ. But Pramata's Curmudgeon is a look. It is a type. It is the things that dog had. To me, that was when you have a visual of what you want.
It's very much the dog we kind of look at and go back to and say, this is kind of what we're trying to do
to maintain,
to circle around, you know.
Yeah.
You're never going to get it exactly, but you're always like edges around the corner.
Yeah, I like
this
that.
litter's going to be this part of him, and this litter's going to be this part of, and you're always just trying to, which helps keep your style, you know. And we say style because a lot of people say keeps your type. Let's be honest. There's a Dachshund type, which is what you should be breeding
that
for.
has a wide range.
That has a wide range of breeder styles, you know. So
yeah.
And then you were
going to
ask me about others?
Yeah, outside of your breeding program.
Gosh. It's kind of cheating to say those 3 Ben sons. Primo, Bubba, Dallas. So part of what...
Yeah, but again, they're all beautiful dogs.
Part of what makes Curmudgeon and Ben and in our breeding program so special, I think, is Curmudgeon was bred to 3 separate bitches from 3 completely unrelated lines, basically, and produced 3 national specialty winners, and ultimate best in show winners.
And those were, you said,
those
Primo,
were Dockshire's Star over Texas,
Dallas,
Pomar's Havana Joe, and Solo's Premier.
Okay.
So let's go back. Part of maintaining that view of Longhair Dachshunds is me having a vision. Bayard Le Maximilian, 1970s something. I think it's a beautiful dog. Now I was born in 74. I think that dog, most of the pictures I've seen are from the mid 70s. Never saw the dog in person. I look at that dog and see type that I just love. It just makes me go, ooh. So that's a dog from the past. The Bayard kennels have a lot of that. A dog named Boondocks Yorktown. Dan Harrison bred it. I showed that dog in juniors. He was actually Ben's grandfather. That dog was just a dream to live with. And he had the most exquisite front ribbing and keel and the shortest hocks that I've ever seen. And that dog was probably 26 pounds, maybe 27 in full weight. And most people thought he was too small. They're like, oh, but he's so small. He was one of those males that would go buck naked in the summer. So like there was no hiding what that dog was. But to me, that dog has the body very similar to Maximilian. That to me is so important. When I talk about body in Longhair Dachshunds, it's ribbing and keel that carries back. Yes, there's a prominent forechest. I don't think it has to be, 4 inches out in front of the dog. If you read our standard, it talks about Dachshunds as being balanced. Their Tom's described it as moderate. I see those dogs. So Yorktown, Maximilian. What are some of the other dogs that you think of? Anything that I'm missing?
No.
I look at, so Boondocks Panama Jack is a dog that they call, what are they called? A prominent sire. So that dog was used. It is in probably every pedigree. That dog had some things that he produced that were beautiful. He had a beautiful front and ribbing. His rear was less than desirable, in my opinion. When I look at him, that's not the type I want. I recognize it. I see it, and I can see that dog in a lot of dogs. I can look at a pedigree and see a dog and say, I bet if I look at that pedigree, there's a lot of PJ in that. So he was definitely a sire of influence where that front came across in a lot of dogs. And as a breeder, fronts are very, very difficult. But one of the things that I take a lot of pride in is that our breeding program, we believe that a Dachshund is a balanced dog and they have to have a rear as well. For our breeds function, they go down a hole. And what is really important is form follows function. The way that dog gets down the hole is it pushes with its rear. The front of that dog is used to move the dirt. So they dig with their mouth, they move the dirt with their front feet, and that prominent forechest, the important part of that forechest is this keel because that is what they are pushing themselves down the hole. That keel is what is protecting all of those important organs as they're going down that hole or running through the brush or whatever. So for me, those dogs that I see as, you know, really lovely type have balance and structure that to me is important to be carried forward. Tom.
What were you to say? What, Vicki?
Oh, I just wanted to know if you had any other outside of your breeding program ones you wanted to mention.
No, I mean, I think we discussed. I mean, that's kind of why we are on the same page. We're about the same dogs. I mean, and for me, obviously, I came into the scene much later, so a lot of it is photos. But it's the same reason, you know, I was drawn to these pedigrees was the Bensons. You know, like I saw Primo at my first national when I went to Riverside in 2010 when he won, and I'm like, that's a beautiful dog. And then seeing the pictures of Bubba and the pictures of Dallas, I'm like, this is the style that is what I see when I see a standard long hair. So, you know, I think those are the, you know, that's really.
I feel like it's such a gift that, like, you know, I didn't grow up in a family that showed and breed dogs. Well, my mom did breed dogs, but they were like, you know, she was a backyard breeder kind of. I mean, we love them, but like she didn't make beautiful dogs. But like, I can't imagine being able to talk to my parents and learn all about dogs from them. You know what I mean? And get to be like, just brought up in that environment and to be able to be like, oh, this dog's back here. Can you tell me about that one? Because they probably can, you know, like, because they probably saw it. If not had their hands on it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's really cool that you get to do that and that you guys are doing it as a team now. Last question. What do you guys think it takes to be a breeder of influence? Because I think you are. And I think, you know, in addition to the beautiful dogs, you know what, why, how do you get there? You probably talked some about it.
Yeah. So I think the objectivity and criticalness of your own breeding. So not just your breeding, what you're producing. So you have to be critical and honest and objective. You have to have a focus. So you have to know what you want. It's really hard to breed a breed of influence when literally from breeding to breeding, you have different things. The fact that a Pramada-Koradox dog can walk in the ring in Japan and a judge from America will come to me a month later and say, did you send a dog to Japan and show me the catalog and know that? So that's about the focus. So I would say focus and being critical and being honest. And then along with those things is making those hard decisions when that's the case. So it's great to be critical, but you have to be willing to take and say that doesn't work. I'm not keeping that and placing those in forever homes. So I think that's important. But then the other aspect of it is recognizing what you contribute to the breed and being willing when someone comes to you and says, I need this. I would like to breed to this dog, and this is why. Sharing that bloodline with that person. Because otherwise, all you're doing is breeding for yourself, and you're not contributing to the betterment of standard long hairs.
Right, and that goes both ways. You know, when somebody asks, they have, you know, they have to be willing to say, this is what they have to know what they want too. Like we get a lot of people who are like, so I have this bitch, and I need to fix this. What do you have that'll fix that? And it's like, okay, you're not fixing that in one generation. You're probably not fixing that in 2 generations. But if your long-term goal is to get to this point, here's how we can get you to there. Because I think a lot of people say, like we were saying, that's why the pedigrees are so willy-nilly. They're like, okay, I made this puppy. It needs a narrower front and it needs a better rear. Oh, this dog has a front that's a little narrower and this rear's a little stronger, so I'm going to breed to that without looking at the whole picture. I'm like, well, what did that dog produce? What did that dad's dog produce? What did that, you know? So knowing pedigrees, and it's hard to know them if you're new and you haven't seen them. So that's why I think breeders of influence or breeders who've been around can be helpful in saying this was, but they have to be honest when they're being helpful, and say,
Right.
well, this dog was, of course, our honesty is all what we remember seeing,
Right.
but it's why it's also good to kind of ask around and look at those. I mean, there are plenty of old DCA newsletters, for instance, floating around. There are dog show magazines from every breed just floating around. So collect those, find those, get them, flip through them, look at these dogs that in your pedigree, see, ask questions and know what you're, get an idea of when you see, the paper that the pedigree is on is worthless if you don't know what you're looking at. You can match and mix and do all this, you can do the mathematical pedigree type.
Yeah.
If you don't know what those dogs look like, you're just, you won't,
You're right that somebody like me who sat at Dachshund Specialties with the greats, and, I probably wasn't as quiet as I should have been. I chimed in and, wanted to be involved and contribute. But I can remember sitting at dinner in Louisville, Kentucky with, Dan Harrison and Wally Jones and all of their friends and talking about the day and who won that day and what dogs there were and where they came from and what those pedigrees were and why this one that so-and-so bred should have been gorgeous and actually wasn't, and how that happened or why they thought that happened. Those 25 years of my life growing up and just being part of the community of long-haired Dachshunds and seeing it and participating in it and seeing all those dogs, that's a big benefit and something that you can't replicate when you don't come in as a second generation. I mean, Tom,
Exactly.
I can't replicate that for Tom. I can share the knowledge as best I can. And we'll sit, my dad's really good at it. They'll talk about it. Mom, the same thing. Like, we'll sit and I'll bring up a dog and they can go back, 3 or 4 generations and talk about what that dog had or didn't have, or, and to me, that is invaluable because a magazine is a picture and pictures can lie.
Yeah.
They can tell the truth too.
We say that all the time.
Pictures can lie.
When we do photos, we're like, pictures tell the truth and they lie. So we can make the ugliest puppy look beautiful.
Fantastic. And I'm not talking Photoshop. I'm just talking, angle and stacking and baiting and whatever. You can get a really good picture of probably a majorly faulted dog,
right?
But it'll make a great pet and the picture looks good. So, but being able to ask people that. So we have a young man who's asked us to mentor him, and he doesn't even have a show dog yet. Like, how do you research pedigrees, and how do you know, how do you know what a good pedigree is? And I'm like, you can't just know a good pedigree. Like,
that's where the
experience comes in. Like, you have to know what that dog looks like. You can look at a pedigree and I can tell you what each of the dogs are probably, but I think where people have an error, or where kind of we get a challenge, is people come into breeding and they think pedigrees are so important, and all they know in a pedigree is this was a top winner and this was a top winner and this was a top winner, and rankings don't necessarily mean anything about the quality of the dog or what that dog produced or where that dog came from. I mean, there was a absolutely exquisite mini wire that I showed that literally came from a breeder who I don't even know if they'd produced more than like champions, basically. But it was a beautiful little dog, and sometimes, random click, beautiful, it worked. But that's, if you saw that dog that won big at a national and did all these things, but if you saw what that dog came from, you would never use it in your breeding program. I mean, there was nothing. Like, I saw the mother, I'm like, how did that happen? But that's the difference.
He was a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, but that's the difference between someone who has the experience and has the time and can go, the time in the breed that has seen it, looking at stats and rankings and wins does not mean that that dog was a good producer, came from good lines, or, is what your breeding program needs.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the thing is if you're new and you're starting out, or even if you're not new and just go and talk to not even at shows, like email. We have so many ways to talk to breeders these days: phone calls, emails, Zoom, and talk to different ones and get different points of view. And instead of, I think we have this instant gratification society where a new person's like, I want to do this and I'm going to breed this, and they don't want to take the time to say, okay, well, wait a minute, this person actually knows some of the history and can give me some insight into this. And then I'm going to ask this person who can give me some insight from a different point of view. And then, you get 10 points of view. Eventually, you're going to average it out to find that circle of, this is probably about where...
This is what I want.
This is where I think this is,
I mean, when Tom got...
that's what it's the generic thing. Everybody says it. Just talk to people and listen. But I mean, we're guilty of it too. Nobody sits around dog shows after they're done showing anymore. We are just as guilty of it as everybody else.
As everyone else, yeah.
When you're finished showing, you're just like, I just want to go home. It's very rare that, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of specialty clubs hold on to those independent specialty sites that are at like hotels, like a national, because you're in a place where you're like, I don't have to go home. I think that's what makes things like,
you go change your clothes and then everybody goes and sits down somewhere and
that's I guess that's another thing. If you're new, is like, and the national is in your area, go and just spend that time not showing. Just go and don't bring a dog.
And it's funny, Tom bought Callie from me, but his first national was in Atlanta, Georgia.
Riverside. Riverside.
You went to Riverside before you went to Atlanta? You took Wally to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So he took Wally to Atlanta. And I actually had to go. I was sponsoring him to join DCA. I had to be there. I had a work event, and I literally flew in, went to the annual meeting for his membership vote, and then I left. And I'm like, you're here for a few days. I'm like, you need to talk to these breeders. And I gave him a list of like 5 different breeders and said, try and spend some time with these people. Now, lucky for me, he ultimately came back and decided he liked what I had and what I do, and we were close and physically, locale, and then ultimately became co-breeders and very good friends, and now we're married. But at that time, part of what I thought my job as a mentor was to say, this is my point of view and this is what I see and this is what's important to me, but it's not everything. And so please expand your horizons at this opportunity you have at this national with all these people in the same place, and try and spend some time and talk to them and see their dogs and look at their dogs and do that. Because the reality is, while I'm very pleased with what Pramada has done, that there are other people who have produced dogs that I think are lovely, as I've said, in the dogs that I like and from other breeders. So it's, it's you have to be able to, I think part of being a good breeder is recognizing not just your faults, but where is there a benefit somewhere else, and where could you maybe go somewhere else. And that's why I went to England and I went to Australia, and we go to the Frozen Seaman, and we went to Sammy, the kind of bigger mini dog, and you don't just have to breed within your little circle if you're being objective and honest with your breeding program.
I think that's probably, I would say that's probably the number one, if not in the top 5 mistakes, if you want to call somebody's decision a mistake, people make, is they breed for convenience. So convenience, they want to do these breedings, but then something convenient will be easier, or something cheaper will be easier, because we all know breeding is not, if you're doing it right, it's not a cheap option.
Right.
And then I think that, I was going to do this, but this was close. So, I mean, how many times have you heard, I was going to go to this dog and I really like it, but this one was just right here and it was easy. And she came in season and I didn't have time to, so you know, don't, if you want to up your game or up your, you know, if you want to improve, you can't breed for convenience all the time or breed to the big winner all the time. You have to go beyond that. So.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you guys doing this. This was so much fun. I learned so much about your breeding program and everything. So thank you so much. And everybody who's watching, you can, I see some questions here, mostly just kind comments, but I'm sure I'll be taking a look. And so if you have any questions, you can ask on there. I will be happy to show it to Tom and Maggie and or tag them on it. So thanks again, you guys. I'm going to stop this recording